Hey guys, welcome back to the third episode of the Final Year Project Diaries. Yeah, I'm actually excited today because I'm going to show you guys what I've done. Yeah, I know you guys probably laugh at what I've done, but in any case, yes. So yeah, this is the third episode. This is the third video. In the last video, we looked at my architecture, or we're trying to build an architecture or have some sort of format to what we are trying to do over here. And in this video, I'm going to go into my VS Code and show you guys what I've done, or what I've been trying to do throughout all these years, right? All these years. Funny. Anyway, I think I should make this a little bit big so that you guys can see what I'm doing. I'm going to count so that I bring it back. I think you guys can actually see. I mean, if you can't see, let me know. If you can see, that one to let me know. But I hope you can see so that I wouldn't have to, increase the font because it really looks huge on my end, right? So if you're already familiar with PyQt, then you know that to start a PyQt application, you basically have to create a window, a QMain application, a QMain window, or whatever. Create an app, create a window, show the window, and then you execute the application. Basically, that's it. So yes, this is basically what I'm doing over here. But I'm actually creating the main window from another place. So if you go into my main window package module, it's a package, right? If you go into the main window package over here, you would see my main window file here, right? So I'm going to be going through what I've done. But first of all, let me just run the app so that you guys should at least be looking at what I'm doing. There should be some sort of visual explanation to it, not just code. You get what I'm saying? So I'm going to run the app first before we continue. I'm just going to do Python, I believe it's app.py. I'm in the directory already, right? So this is the current state of what I have, right? So as you can see, there is I think my head is there. My head is covering that side. Let me bring it down a bit. But anyway, as you can see here, there are three sections, right? There is this section here where my mouse is. This is the components pane. The black part over here is the canvas, and the blue part here is supposed to be the attributes pane, which I have not touched yet. And the top bar here is supposed to be the toolbar, having the wire tool, of course. But this is a very simple structure, and please bear with me. Let's just roll with this one. Going to, how do I minimize this? Can I? I mean, I can bring it down a bit. Yeah, that works. Anyway, so inside my main window, there is the normal usual stuff, right? It's basically a subclass of the QMain window class, and what I'm going to be doing is to create set up the initial stuff. So the window title and stuff like that. And like I said, there are three parts. So there is the components pane, the canvas, and the attributes pane, right? And then there is this initial setup of how the thing is going to look, so where the components pane is supposed to be and stuff like that. I am using a the horizontal box layout to make sure that they are horizontally aligned. I think if you already know how PyQt works, then you would understand this. I can't be teaching PyQt here, so I'm sorry. Maybe I could make another video on that. Anyway, so I have this, right, and there's also a function that creates the toolbar. I'm sorry, there is a lot of noise in the background, but I hope my mic could be able to filter them out. But if not, I'm sorry. Yeah, so there is a create toolbar function at the top here, right? Which basically creates a toolbar. It creates a toolbar, adds the toolbar to the window, and adds one item, which is a wire item, right? And it says that whenever the wire item, whenever the wire tool is clicked, it should connect it to this function here, which is on wire tool clicked, right? And it sends the state to the state of the wire tool. I told you it's toggleable. It's not a word. Toggleable. You can toggle it, it can be on or off, that kind of thing. It's not something that you just click on and then stop. So it sends the state to this function, and this function sends the state to the canvas, the on wire tool click function on the canvas. So this is how I connect the thing. So stuff that I need to like transfer between the three different sections, I do it through the main window. So the main window takes something and then sends it down to another component. Yeah, that makes sense, right? Then yeah, but then let's look at the components pane so that we would be able to like understand the stuff that I've done here, right? So this is the components pane, right? And the components pane has the initial, like it has a signal. It has a signal class which is supposed to be like a framework to define its signal object, but currently it has only one signal inside, which is a component selected signal, because that's the only thing we are currently looking out for, right? So it has the initial UI, right? It has a vertical box layout because the stuff are, you know, arranged vertically, and then it has what, a search box that currently has no use, but then if you look at this, like the search box is supposed to be like a place where they can search for components instead of having to like select a category. But then you can also select category. Currently there is only one category, and then if you select the category, then the component will show up, right? So it has a search box, then it has a line. This line, like this line here, which is like not that straightforward to create inside PyQt, so I have to like do some utility stuff to be able to do it. But there is a line, right? Then there is component categories, which is like a combo box, which is this drop down menu over here, right? So there's component category, and I'm setting the placeholder as what this just a component category, right? And where do I get the items from? I get it from this utility function that helps me get the component categories. Now if you go inside this utility function, it basically returning the keys of a certain dictionary that I'm calling component category map, which is essentially a dictionary of component category and a list of the actual components. So we'll go into like how the actual components look like, but this is a resistor and this is a list of resistors, right? So when I get a component category over there, I basically just like lists them all here, and what I do is that I connect this. I connect this component categories combo box here to this on component category change function, so that anytime someone changes the selected item in the combo box, this function will be called. Now, whenever this function is called, it gets the selected category, like whatever is selected at the moment, and it tries to get that, should I say, the list, right? The list from that component category map that I showed you. It's a dictionary, so you do .get and it gets like what, the actual components, right? So this is supposed to be like a list of components, right? So then it gets that list and displays it at the bottom of the combo box, just like this resistor. Right now there's only one thing in there, that's why there's only resistor. I mean, if there were multiple things, all of them will be displayed over here. I know, like, I'm not focusing on the nice aspects of the UI. I'm more focused on making everything work first, then we like try and improve how it's actually looking, right? So when it gets those components, it's basically adds it to like the components that are there. Now if I were not to remove the ones that were there already, then it would like just be adding it to it. So I had to like write some sort of logic to remove the components that are already there, so that when you change the category, like the components will not just be listed under it. I hope you understand what I'm trying to say, but if you don't, feel free to tweet to me on Trevini44 Twitter. I mean, tweet to me on Twitter at Trevini44 is the handle, and like we'll talk about this. I mean, don't like stress it, right? So for each of the components, I basically create a label for it and connect the mouse press event to another function, such that when that component is pressed, like when I press on this resistor for instance, this function will be called. Now when you press on this function, like this handler returns a function that would actually be called when you press on the component, like when you press on the component, right? And what that does is to basically send a signal using a component selected signal, and send that component to wherever it is. Like it basically sends a signal, right? Something has to intercept the signal, of course, right? So that is where the when you go back to the main window, you have this function here that says connect signals, which essentially like takes signals from where they need to be generated from and connects them to where they need to be intercepted from. And what I've done here is to connect the components pin, like the signal, the component selected signal from the components pin. I'm connecting that to a function here on the main window, which I'm calling on component select. And what this basically does, takes that component which was sent from the components pin and then calls the add components function of the canvas, right? We'll look at the GUI in a sec, but let's look at how this add components function of the canvas actually works so that it would, all come together, right? So this is a canvas, right? The initial UI, some flags to help with like manipulation and stuff, and the components data that like the components dictionary that I talked about, like to keep track of the components, and then some initial UI, the graphics scene thing I was telling you about, and the add component. So the add component essentially takes the component in here, creates an instance of the component, because it's actually taking a class of the component, it's not taking an instance of the component. Creates an instance of the component here, and then there are also signals on the component. For example, the terminal click signal on the component, which would end up being connected to on the terminal click function. But anyway, it creates a component and then connects the necessary signals, and then it adds the item, which is a component, to the scene for it to show, and then it keeps track of it by updating the component dictionary that I have at the top over there. So looking at how that works, when I click on this register, it adds it here. I mean, I'm not specified where it's supposed to be added, but it's added here as a component, right? So this is basically the register components, right? And when you have two components, right? Like when I come back here and I have two components on my canvas, right? And I try to like connect the two of them. I have like should I say terminals over here. I can like use those terminals to connect the two of them. So on terminal click, this is actually also like a signal being sent from somewhere else, like from the components, because that's what I did over here. But anyway, that function basically takes the unique ID of the component and the index of the terminal that was selected. So like terminal 0 or terminal 1, and then the ID of the component that was selected, like the ID of the component whose terminal was selected, right? When I get that, I check to see if the wire tool is active, right? If the wire tool is active, then I have like this combination of like the unique ID and the terminal index, and I'm calling it the clicked terminal. And if the clicked terminal is not already in the selected terminals, so you see, you have to select two terminals to be able to connect them, right? So I'm keeping track of what terminals you select, like when the wire tool is active. So if it's not already in there, so just to like prevent you from clicking the same thing twice, if it's not already in there, then you add it to it. So I do that, like I do .append this. Now after adding it to it, I check the length of the selected signal to see the selected terminals to see if it's 2, if it's up to 2. If it's up to 2 by then I draw the wire and then I clear the terminals again. I'll come back to where I draw the wire, but let's see how the wire tool works. So the wire tool is actually like, I already told you guys about like what really happens here, right? I told you that when the wire tool is clicked over here, it calls this function, it calls the on wire tool click and sends the state of the wire tool action, the toolbar, on the toolbar, and sends the state to the canvas over here. So when that state comes here, I basically use that state here to update the state that I'll be using to like manage if the terminals are clicked, like whether to connect the wires or not, like that idea, right? That's what I used to manage it. And I believe that, I think I should have changed this. If not wire tool active, or if not wire tool state or wire tool active. So if the wire tool is not active, I should actually clear this. It shouldn't be selected terminals, right? If not self.wire tool active, then I should clear the terminals, right? Now let's come back to how the drawing is actually done. So to actually draw, your wire needs both the component and the terminal for both the start and the end. So the wire components are created takes in a start and an end, and the start is the component and the terminal index, and the end to is the component and the terminal index, so that it would be able to keep track of the terminals as you drag in, you drag around. So if you look at this here, my stat is actually a component and terminal index, which is a type that I created. It's basically a class that helps me, like, should I say, it's not anything fancy, it's just a class that has two attributes, component and terminal index, right? So I get the components, the actual components, from the self.components dictionary at the top there, using, I have the selected terminals, right? So the first terminal, if you look here, it's unique ID and terminal index. So if I take the first terminal, I take the unique ID and then use that to get the component. Then I take the terminal index. I do the same thing for the end. I get the component and the terminal index. Then I use that start and end to create a wire. Then I add a wire to the scene for it to show, right? I should probably also keep track of the wires, but for now, that's what happens, right? So if I try to do that, so I'll click on the wire tool here, then I click on an end, and then I click on an end, and the wire gets connected, right? And because of the signals I'm using, when I drag this around, I still get the wire being connected. That's the nice thing about it. And you can, do it again for all of this side of it, right? Anyway, so now that we've looked at this, we can now go for it and look at the actual components and how they are. So we start with the resistor component, right? And this is where a lot of code is, for now. I'm trying as much as possible to make it modular, but then somehow the files keep getting long, right? So the resistor inherits from the general components class, which is here. I've already talked of that in the architecture video, the previous video, episode 2, right? So the general components basically defines the structure of a component. It says that every component should have a name and it should have a signal object, which is from this signal class I've created over here. In this case, I'm only interested in terminal clicked and then to know whether the component is moved. And if the terminal is clicked, I send a string and an int, which is basically the component's unique ID and the components the index of the selected terminal. Then I also have a function which says get terminal positions, that is being used by other components to be able to know the actual terminal position, in terms of the coordinates on the scene that would be connected by the wires, right? So that's what a general component is supposed to be. So when you come here and I create the resistor, I basically now define the name as resistor, because here the name wasn't defined. I define a name here as resistor. I pass in the components count to create a unique ID, because that's used to create a unique ID, like I was saying, resistor 1, resistor 2, that kind of thing, right? Then this stuff is what I use to draw the resistor. So I have a width, height, terminal length, and this flag is supposed to allow the resistor to be movable. In this case, I think I should actually move this flag to the general component, because everything should be movable, right? I think that makes sense. Right. So in that case, if the resistor is movable, I also set some flags over here that I use to make sure that when you hover over a terminal, so for instance, when you hover over a terminal, a circle is drawn over it, and if you hover over a terminal, a circle is drawn over it, right? I have some flags here that I use to do that. Then whenever the component is moved, I make sure that I update the component. This is something normal. So you see there's a component moved signal. So whenever that signal is sent, I update the component. Now the paint function over here is what allows me to draw the component. This is all math, but this is all just math. I tried my best to figure out how to explain it, but then it's straightforward. I get the four corners of the resistor, draw 4 lines, like that, horizontal, vertical, horizontal, vertical. Then I get the ends of the terminals. There are 2 terminals, right? I get the terminal 1's A and B, then I draw a line. I get the terminal 2's A and B, and I draw a line over there. Now, if there is a hover terminal, then I draw a circle around the hover terminal. The hover terminal is actually managed by the hover mouse event over here, which basically it gets called every time you hover your mouse over the item. So I get the position that you've hovered over. Then I check to see, like I find the closest terminal to that where you've hovered over. So if I get the closest terminal, I assign the hover terminal to that component's location, so that whenever you are doing the drawing over here, this would not be none, and then you can draw an actual circle over there. Else it would be none. Else it is none. Like if there is no closed terminal, the value of this hover terminal would be none, right? I hope that that makes sense, right? So the self-draw update just basically recalls the paint to redraw the thing that I have, to redraw the components, right? And how I find the closest terminal is to basically get a terminal positions, which essentially is just also math, the left and right end of the component. I get those two positions. I get the terminal positions, and what I do is I find the closest terminal using some sort of minimum distance. This one is 5. So I iterate over the terminal positions, and after iterating over the terminal positions, I find a distance between my current position and a terminal. If it is less than the minimum distance, then I say that the closest terminal is that particular terminal position. Then I return that terminal position. Very simple, right? And then now, if there is a mouse press event, what I do is that if there is the left button of the mouse that is printed, I get a position of wherever it's printed. I check to see if it's a click terminal, right? So if it's actually a click terminal and it's not none, what I'll do is that I'll get the index, the terminal index, and then I'll send a signal. Remember the terminal click signal that we used on the canvas. So I'll send that signal with a unique ID and a terminal index, and the canvas will handle that, right? And then obviously if there is a mouse move event, I do the same thing. I send a mouse move signal, and when there is a mouse move signal, this accepts it. This does an update. Now, the wire tool also uses the mouse move signal to make sure that the wire is always connected to the ends whenever you move the component, right? So from here, we basically just move on to the wire tool. Yeah, so the wire tool has this setup, right? I already talked of the start and the end part of it, and then I am setting a Z value of 1 because I want the wire tool to appear to be on top of the element, so that's the components will not rather be covering the wires. The wires should show clearly. I am hoping that makes sense. I basically set the start and end here. Then there's a start and end position. These are actually the points. This is the components and index terminal that I have here, and this is actually the point. What I do is that I take the component that is passed as a start, I get a signal, and I connect the components moved to the extract terminals, so that whenever the component is moved, I extract the terminal. Whenever the component is moved, I extract the terminal. And how I extract the terminal is to just make sure that I get the start position and the end position, the point where I'm supposed to actually draw the line. And how I do that is to go to the component, get a terminal position, and I use the terminal index to know which of the terminals I'm supposed to be accessing. Do the same thing for the end position. Go to the component, go to the terminal position, and use the terminal index to know which of them, which of the terminals of that component I'm supposed to be connecting to. So when I get a start position and end position, all I do is to update my component. And updating my component means that it's calling this paint function. And calling this paint function means that it's checking to see if these are defined. If the start position and end position are defined, then it would go ahead, create a pen. I'm using red, I don't know why, and then basically draw a line from the start to the end, right? So remember that component moved signal. So whenever the component is moved, I end up calling this extract terminals again, and then it will extract the new position of the start and end terminals that I'm connecting to, and then it will update again. So that's what allows me to drag this on the canvas and still expect the line to be connected to the same place. And whenever I drag, just to make sure that the line doesn't end up being drawn at every single part that it has passed, I update the scene also. And basically that's everything in a nutshell, right? And Obviously we can look at the attributes pane, but then there's literally nothing in the attributes pane. It's basically just me coloring the place as blue, right? So basically this is what I can do. And that brings us like the introduction part of the final year project diaries, I guess. Yeah. I'm kind of happy that I'm able to share this with you guys, because I feel like you guys need to actually see what I'm working on, even though there was a period that I was really, really down because I felt like I couldn't do it. It was like I wasn't making any progress. Anything I tried, it wasn't working. Then I got motivation from a couple of friends, and I started working on it, and it all started coming together. And now I'm feeling so energetic to work on this, right? So currently, this is what I have working. Next, I need to be able to like draw new components. I need to draw the source components and the ground components, and from there, after drawing that, I start working on the middleware, keeping track of the nodes that the components are connected to. So here, it wouldn't just be me drawing a wire. After drawing the wire, I have to make sure that I update the nodes and then the components connected to that node. And then after doing that, I can now focus on the simulation backend, where depending on the structure of this node and the components, I would be able to create a simulation and actually be able to simulate. Like, I'm very excited to share this with you guys. So yeah, that's it for episode 3 of Final Year Project Diaries. I'll see you guys in the next one. Cheers. If there is anything, obviously, Twitter, tweet to me, or you can maybe comment on this, but then I prefer Twitter because it's easy. I can interact with you guys and then share ideas on this thing that we are working on over here, right? And if you guys are also working on some final year projects or something, definitely share that with me. Currently the repository of this particular project is private, but I would make that public and then link that down in the description. I hope you guys will enjoy this video. Cheers.